Hey everybody. It seems like whenever I post something, I get quite a few questions about how I make such a big flat surface and also how I align things. So I figured I'd do a tutorial and hopefully it helps some people. First of all, we can't really talk about making a flat surface without talking at least a little bit about true flat. True flat is something I don't use a whole lot, but it is pretty cool and it can be helpful, and in some cases it's ideal. The idea is you can't actually make a perfectly flat surface with the flattening tool anywhere on a planet except for north or south poles. If you try to, it's going to be pretty frustrating. Eventually you're going to run into issues and you won't understand what's going on. So north and south pole are where to do it. I'm going to head to the north pole for this tutorial. So once you get out there, you have a couple options. One way or another, you're going to want to bridge out to the center of that gateway with the normal flattening tool. Option one is you can use a leveling block and then just use the regular flattening tool on top of that and go nuts. The other option, which I kind of prefer just because I usually have this on me, is the alignment mod. So you'll just right in the center, you flatten out an area with the alignment mod, and then from that point you turn off the alignment mod and go nuts, flattening out as big of an area as you want. But there are a few little caveats here. One is that the farther out you go, the more sloped it's going to feel. Think about like placing a flat surface on a sphere. That's basically what you're doing. So the area that you can build on is kind of limited unless you don't mind that slope, but it gets kind of annoying in my opinion. Just to demonstrate, here's a recreational sphere. In the center, it's barely, there might be a slight slope, but not much. As you go further out, you're going to see that ball roll faster and faster until you get way out here, and it's pretty pronounced. And I probably wouldn't want to build a base that large with true flat because of it. That's one of the drawbacks to true flat, and I think the others would be, first of all, there's only 2 spots on the whole planet that you can choose to build a true flat base, and you have to deal with that gateway, which I think is kind of an eyesore, but it's not always a drawback depending on what you're doing. A lot of people really don't want to do anything but true flat because it's the only way to make it perfect, but this game really isn't designed to be like Minecraft where everything is absolutely perfect. So I find if you just kind of get over that, you have a lot more options. Like for instance, if you don't do true flat, you can choose wherever you want to put your base. In this case, I found an awesome mountain on Astroneer, which was like almost a perfect circle and a good size, and that's where I chose to make this latest base of mine. So I started out by putting a beacon down at roughly the center, and then I gotta clear it out, which was a bit of a task, but it's really not that bad. It just takes a little bit of time. Once I had the majority of the trees and other stuff cleared out of the way, I just start by using the alignment mod and making a little flat spot. And here what I'm going to do is permanently mark, or semi-permanently mark, the center of this mountain. Later on I do have to move the center, I find, but it's all that matters is that it's roughly the center. I dig a little hole and I put a beacon in it, then I cover it up. And you might be thinking, but then you can't turn off the beacon. And that's true if you are using a keyboard and mouse, which I usually do, but I also have a PS5 and I use the gamepad occasionally. For instance, in this case, if you're using a gamepad, there's this auto select feature which selects the thing closest to you, even if it's underground or out of sight. So that way I can turn on and off a beacon without having to dig it back up, and I can place things on top of it, unlike a beacon that's placed on the surface, and I found it's pretty nice. One thing that's pretty nice is that if you have a PS5 gamepad, you can use that with your PC, with Bluetooth. If you don't have a gamepad to use, don't worry about it, just place the beacon on the ground, it should be fine. So now that I have the center marked, I can get started. There are actually two methods of flattening using the alignment mod that I'm going to go over. This first one is easier, and it does make a pretty much perfectly flat circle, but you're limited in the size of the circle that you can make. But I figured I'd show it just in case it's helpful. You'll notice I put down a button in the center and stand on top of it. This isn't really necessary, but when I'm making big circles, I notice that toward the outer extremities of the circle, it gets kind of hard to see the terrain tool, so I think it kind of helps. So now that we have the alignment mod on, we place our terrain tool over the center and drag outward and just keep going until we've gotten everything. Again, this is a time where I think a gamepad is easier because you can swivel very easily. Just turn in one direction and just keep moving outward a little bit at a time. But if you don't have a gamepad, it doesn't matter. Just do your best. If you do have to stop at any point, like I had to stop to reload soil there, make sure that when you start again that you put the alignment tool or the terrain tool right over the center again. Don't place it out on the outside and start there, because that won't work. It has to be over the center and you drag it outward. So once you have your whole circle made, I like to color it all one color using a terrain analyzer. This just helps it stand out and helps you see how flat it really is. And if there were any imperfections, it should be a lot more obvious if it's all one color. I choose a lighter color for that, like this. So you'll see, look, it's pretty flat. It's really flat. It's nice. And you might be thinking at this point you can just keep going and make it larger, but it doesn't work. There are little nuances to the way that the alignment tool works that make it pretty frustrating if you don't use it properly. So you'll see here, I started out by, just to demonstrate, started out by trying to make that circle larger. And this is actually after quite a bit of trying. I actually thought I may be able to do it, even though I didn't think it was possible. But I was wrong. I couldn't do it. You really can't make it flat. Even if it might appear flat in a certain light, once the light hits the edge in a certain way, you'll notice that it's just not flat. Like you'll see here in a second when I turn to the other side, which is all orange. You're going to see a ridge, a really small but definitely obvious ridge. And that is why you can't use that method of making a circle and make it larger. It's kind of hard limited to that one size of circle. So that brings us to the second method of using the alignment mod. This is the way that I pretty much always do it, and it takes patience, but I find it's totally worth it to have a base wherever I want, of any size I want, that follows the contour of the planet. What you do is you start in the middle and you just make little kind of brush strokes with the terrain tool outward. Do not use the wide mod or best of far. Those using a wider thing isn't going to help. It's actually going to make it worse. So if you use just a regular sized terrain tool with the alignment mod and keep going from the center outward, and then you start. You don't always start in the center. Then you start from the edge of where you were and go again, and keep starting from the edge and just kind of out. You'll see what I'm doing here. And obviously you're going to want to have a lot of soil on hand. I have as many small canisters as I could fit in my backpack, and I keep a silo of medium canisters nearby, and you have to kind of keep going back and filling them. But I don't know, some people wouldn't want to do that, but I still think it's worth it. When there's little things like this, I don't really see them as a big obstacle. Yeah, it might be a little bit of a pain, but I get focused on my end product or whatever it is I'm kind of envisioning, and that's kind of the only thing that matters. So as long as there's a way for me to do it, that's all I care about. I mean, there are limits. I'm not going to spend forever on it, but I might have a higher tolerance for this kind of thing than most people probably for sure do. But, it seems like a lot of people don't even know how to make a large flat surface without doing true flat. So at least this is showing people a way of doing it. Pop some headphones on, listen to some music, and just have fun for a while, and you can make a huge flat area. And as I usually do, when I'm done, I like to color it black. This is the dark black from Aatrox. It just makes a nice contrast to whatever else I want to do with it. It might be too dark for some people, but you use whatever you want. I do recommend making it one color though. And there we go. There's a giant flat area. That whole mountain top is done. It is not perfect in terms of, it's not a perfect circle, but that's something we fix later on. One of my favorite base types is an oval shape. I've used it quite a few times, and it's really easy to do. Everything fits nicely around it. It's just something I really enjoy doing, so I decided I'd make a quick tutorial on how to make an oval. I start by standing in the center and putting my terrain tool at max range with the narrow mod and making a circle. You might have to go over it a couple times and play with it a little, but that's going to be kind of the first guide that we're going to use for our oval. And this is another thing I find a little bit easier to do with a gamepad, but perfectly doable with a keyboard and mouse also. Just have to be a little more careful. So once we have that circle, we're going to grab an extra large platform C, and we're going to line up the cable plug on the end with the beacon. This is how I make sure it's as precise as possible. I line it east to west just for fun, so I'm going to try to line it up right there. There's 4 little dots or squares at the end of the cable plug. That's what I use to align that axis. So once I have the beacon line going right between all 4 of those plugs, all 4 of those squares on the plug, just like that, then I want to make sure that the beacon line there is also going through that bar on the outside, which it is. It doesn't have to be perfect, but that's my way of making it as precise as possible when working with these things. So from that point, we're going to be adding a few more of these platforms. As you can see, most people are aware of this, but you put it on another platform, or you mouse over it until it rotates, and then you can move it off, and that aligns it with the other platform automatically. When I do this, I'm trying to line up those 2 little gray brackets at the end of the platforms. This is definitely one of the things in the game that takes the most patience. Some people will have different tolerances than others. I like to get it pretty close to perfect. There we go. It looks like it's a single bracket on each side. That's as lined up as I can reasonably get it. So for this one, we don't want to put it end to end like the other one. We actually want the left end of it there to be at the edge of our circle. We're trying to find the point on the circle, which will be the center point of another circle. So here I'm trying to line it up with the little storage dots, or whatever you want to call them, slots. In order to do that, there's quite a bit of overlap. You can only do that when you have this view, when you're lower to the ground and looking from the direction of the platform you're moving toward the platform you're aligning it with. Otherwise, you won't be able to overlap that much. There we go. So finally I get something I'm happy with. It's not perfect, but I think I tried for like 2 minutes on that one and just got sick of trying. But, perfection is unattainable or whatever. I just try to make it close to perfect because little errors will compound over time, especially if you're making something large. So I'm doing the same thing on this side, trying to line up those storage slots. I don't think it takes me too long here. Just a couple of tries. Nope. Yep. Nope. There we go. That one looks good. Alright. After that, I'm just going to bury a beacon at the end of both of these. Right where the circle meets the ends of those platforms. I'm going to bury beacons. And when you're burying a beacon, you want to make sure that you check that the top of the beacon won't be sticking out of the soil once you cover it up. You want it totally buried. Then line it up with the end of that cable plug just as before. And yep, that looks good right on the edge. Then we're going to cover it back up. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. And on this side, we run into a little problem, which I'm sure you've seen. We started digging, and it popped that platform out of place, and it started going crazy. So it's really not anything to worry about, though. We just move it out of the way. And we already know right about where that beacon's supposed to be, so we're just going to keep digging. And there we go. I checked, and it wasn't deep enough, so make it a little deeper. Check again, and that looks good. Then we're going to move that beacon out of the way and move this platform back into place. And you always want to do a lot of saving, backups before you do mess with the terrain, especially near platforms. I did quite a few for this. So once I get that platform realigned, there we go. I then place the beacon, I line it up and do it, and when I go to fill it back in, you'll see the platform pops out. Not a problem this time, because I don't need it anymore. The beacon is in the right spot. And we're going to go ahead and package all these platforms up anyway, because at this point we have those 3 beacons in place. And these are the beacons that we need in order to make our oval. Go ahead and erase that big circle that I made before. So now I'm on one of the 2 end beacons, and I'm going to make a circle around just like I did that first circle. This time I'm not using the narrow mod. It's just a normal sized terrain tool. And it can be a little bit tricky to make a circle even with the gamepad. Sometimes it doesn't want to cooperate, and here you'll see I just wind up filling it in. It's not pretty on the inside, but the outside part is what matters the most. So once I have that first circle done, I hop over to the other beacon. The original center beacon is turned off. Those 2 outer beacons are turned on. So you'll see I make 2 of those circles. Looks like a figure 8. And now all I have to do is make the straight sides of the oval. It's something you can eyeball, but I prefer not to. So I kind of use a couple methods in order to do that. For the most part, it's going to be similar to what I was doing before with lining up the platforms. But basically, I'm just going to be finding the points on the oval that I need to connect in order to make those straight sides. So a lot of the same stuff, putting down the platforms and lining them up. This is a diagram that shows kind of what we're doing. Of course, in the middle is the center, And we have the two other black points, which are two other beacons. The circles there, and what we're doing right now is going to be the blue dots, and we connect the blue dots to make the sides of the oval, and then we're done. So once I have the platforms lined up with the ends pointed to where those blue dots would be, I use a button with the wire. I've used the button wire to make the lines between them. It's kind of just eyeballing it, but then again, painting the ground isn't going to be an exact science either. So you can do it pretty accurately if you're just real careful. And once I have the button wire laid out there, then I just kind of color within the lines. It's not a big deal if you mess up. You can always fix it real easily, or do the other side in the same way. And that's the oval pretty much. At this point, we just have to clean it up. So package up those platforms, put them out of the way, and fill in the oval. Hey, you don't have to fill in the oval. You can just you can even delete it once you're done placing platforms around it, but I like it to be a different color. And there it is from the sky. It looks pretty good. So I did want to show you one example of why this base is worth building, in my opinion. All my bases have the same kind of layout, which is that the storages and workstations are typically on the outside, and the middle is kind of open or has a few platforms. It's kind of like a workshop layout or a kitchen or something. But this particular version gives you plenty of space to put everything, and that's why I like it. So hopefully this has helped you guys out. I might do another couple tutorials if people want it. But anyway, thanks for watching.